It is officially the offseason, and the Texans have a lot of work to do. They fired offense coordinator Bobby Slowick. Now they kind of need to figure out what direction do they want to go in, and that first thing of business is re-signing players. And one name who's going to hit the free agency block is Stefon Diggs. Now, the scoop that I'm hearing is that the Texans are most likely going to sign Diggs. However, Diggs can listen to other offers. They do have the rights to him, but they have to sign him before February 17th or re-sign him if they want to initiate that cap hit. He's going to get $16 million in a cap hit if the Texans don't re-sign him for a future contract. So he is a free agent. This could save $7 million. But in the end, it's a matter of breaking this down as to what do the Texans do at wide receiver. Does Stefon Diggs retain with the team? Do the Texans trade for a wide receiver? We're going to break everything down here on Texans Digest. If you're new to the channel, subscribe to the channels. We are dropping the latest Texans news. But let's jump right into things. The first order of business, Stefon Diggs is most likely going to join another team. And here's why. The Texans are not going to offer him a big-time contract, mainly because of his ACL injury. And I personally wouldn't want to re-sign Diggs. The only real value to re-signing Stefon Diggs is to keep him as a locker room presence kind of guy. And I never really thought I'd say that about Stefon Diggs because, surprisingly, he adapted into the role of being a number two fairly well. The story on the Bills was the fact that he wasn't getting the ball enough and that he wasn't being utilized as this big number one wide receiver. But now he goes to the Texans and accepts his number two role. Nico Collins has maintained the one fairly well. But the thing I want to mention here is the Chargers could come in at a higher offer. And this is where the Texans could steer away from signing Diggs and just void the rights and let him go. So it's a tough situation because you don't want to not have a receiver, right? Tank Dell is injured. He's most likely not going to play next season. You got Nico Collins. You got John Mechie. Stefon Diggs would be nice. There's a real possibility the Texans could consider trading up for Emeka Buka in the draft. I love Diggs. I think he's a great player. He's a great locker room guy. However, he can easily come back and not be the same player that he once was, and to pay $15 million a year for a wide receiver who's 31, turning 32 this season, I don't think it's the best idea. It's just not in the right interest. Let's look at his stats through 8 games this season. So looking at Diggs, he had a productive year. He was on pace for 1,000 yards through 8 games. I mean, that's pretty much halfway through the season, and he was at 500 yards, averaging around 50, 60 yards a game. And I will say, first year with Stroud, he definitely found a little bit of time to get his foot on the ground and figure out a rapport with the quarterback. But this is not a guy that you shouldn't not re-sign. Like, he's definitely a good player for the organization, and I don't mind signing him for a longer 2-year, $30 million contract because the receiver market is kind of limited. Unless you kind of want to trade everyone, get your cap space around $30 million for this offseason, and go get a guy like T. Higgins. That is what I would love to do. However, you could also go get a Deebo Samuel who just requested a trade. Maybe get a 5th-round pick for Samuel. Or you also got, Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson has kind of been on the trade block rumors. I know the Jets haven't really been shopping him, but this is another guy who could, with the right price, could be a good addition. Now, all the likelihood of the Texans trading for a wide receiver with a big contract, maybe Cooper Kupp, it just doesn't sound right. And I think the thing that makes the most sense is re-signing Stefon Diggs. And let's break this down even further. So if they do bring him back, they will save nearly $7 million in cap space, spreading it out over the future of his contract and keeping Stroud a key weapon. And this is a new era now. They fired offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick. Nick Caley is in. The Rams game pass coordinator. He's going to do well. And looking at this team, you need deep wide receiver help. The only other way to really get a wide receiver besides in the draft and besides maybe a trade, because they might be over the salary cap, but it's so tough to tell right now. And everything is pointing towards the Texans making this move. On the 17th, if they don't do it, it's just a dumb idea not to do it. And as much as I earlier in the offseason kind of said, hey, I don't want the Texans to re-sign Diggs because he's 32, at this point, you might as well just bring him back because he's been there last year. The only real problem I have is that coming off an ACL injury, most players do not typically perform. So I'd like to go get another player, whether that's Tez Johnson at the end of the first round, whether that's Garrett Wilson in a trade, or Deebo Samuel, or you just sign Jawan Jennings. I want that depth for the Texans. I love John Mechie, but 3, 4, I need a little bit of a stack there, right? Like maybe I know this is bad, but maybe a Chris Conley, somebody who could just be a veteran, fill the role, and do their job, right? Deontay could have been a perfect piece for the Texans. However, the diva mentality was not liked, and he was shipped off immediately. But that's a guy, a good route runner, who can get it done. So there's so many things for the Texans to really consider right now. And the main problem is I don't know if the Texans are going to offer him a crazy contract. And the question will kind of come down to, does Stefon Diggs want to stay with the Texans? Because if he wants to stay with a contender like the Texans, if he considers them a contender, he'll take less to try and win a championship. He said it before, and there's so many different sites like ESPN and CBS and Sports Illustrated kind of quoting that he wants to go to a top AFC or NFC contending team. And if he wants to go to a contender, the Bills might be, going back to the Bills might be a good spot. But looking at the teams in the AFC, it's kind of limited. Where does he go? Jacksonville? Where does Stefon Diggs go? The Chargers, maybe? The Broncos? Like, you have to consider what can he make. And as a wide receiver, 31 years old, declining. Now, keep in mind, the wide receiver market is kind of crazy right now. So you don't know what he's going to make. But Gabe Davis got $10 million a year from Jacksonville, and he's now irrelevant on that team. So my point here is, do you pay a veteran wide receiver $15 million to not know if he'll be the same guy after an injury? Yes and no. The yes part is the fact that he's been there. He can help coach up the young guys. And the no part would be the fact that you could save money and go a different direction. So that's kind of my take on it. Let me know how you Texans fans feel. Stefon Diggs staying in Houston? I'm not too sure. All the signs are looking probable for the Texans to maintain Diggs. The only question I have for Nick Caserio, the general manager, is what do you do from here? You don't have a lot of cap space. Joe Mixon has talked about potentially recruiting Joe Mixon, and I'm not too sure if that's going to work out. So you have to consider trading some of your top guys on salary, and that includes all-pro tackle Laremy Tunsil, as well as tackle Titus Howard, who you just re-signed, and Nico Collins, who's on a big contract. Obviously, you're not going to trade Nico Collins, but the other guys on big contract, Shaq Mason, cut him. Dalton Schultz, trade him. He's on a $10 million cap hit. You can't have this. Excuse me. So that's the Texans videos for today. Stefon Diggs potentially staying or not in Houston. The reports are that he may go somewhere else because he's going to get offered around 16, 17 million, which the Texans may not be willing to give up. So they do have the rights to him, but it's a matter of what do they decide to do. And so far, they've made pretty entertaining moves, right? Joe Mixon, the running back, has talked about Caserio potentially going to get a big-name wide receiver. The other side of things say, hey, we're trying to revamp this offense completely. So that, with the new offensive coordinator, it could look like they're going a separate direction and moving on from Stefon Diggs. So a lot to break down for the Texans moving forward. You need a wide receiver badly. Diggs looks like he's going elsewhere. So let me know your thoughts once more. But this has been Mike Zanetti, Texans Digest. Appreciate everyone watching, and we'll see you in the next video.